Okay, welcome everybody to Siman Tuf Kuf Tesvav. We'll try to cover a few points here today in the Shiur. In the beginning of Tuf Kuf Tesvav, the Shulchan Aruch says, "Akam shehevi daran li Yisrael b'Yom Tov, im yesh b'minam v'chuber, asher mechusar tzeda, asur after mishalo huva b'shilo la'ochlo bo b'yom." So he brought a daran li Yisrael, and it has minim mechuber. So it's one of two things: either it's mechuber, or so it's mechusar, the malacha of plucking it off the tree, or it's chaser tzeda, so it's an animal that was caught on Yom Tov. Afiva over and nasan lepiv, also asur levala. Even if you put it in your mouth, you can't chew it. It's asur, even if you've already said a bracha. Afiva taltal and asur. It's also an isser of total muktzah. So it's an isser achila and an isser of muktzah. Well, erev mutar b'chtei shiyasu, and then at night it's mutar after Yom Tov b'chtei shiyasu, on regular Yom Tov. So now it gets involved in the machlokas we spoke about in the past. And the Torah speaks over here by Barichas Gedola about the machlokas Rashi and Tosas and Beitza, which we discussed and many times in the past. We went through from various angles the machlokas Rashi and Tosas of Yom Tov Sheni over here in this Isser. So the Shulchan Aruch says that the B'shnei Yamim Tovin Shel Golias Im Huva B'Yam Rishon Mutter Miyad V'lo Yom Tov Sheni B'chtei Shiyasu. So he's saying that it's mutter on Leil Yom Tov Sheni. So the Shulchan Aruch is paskening like Shitas Rashi, that it's going to be mutter Leil Yom Tov Sheni. There's no problem. And the Ramah brings down Yesh Machmir L'Asur Ad Motza Yom Tov Sheni. That's the Torah B'Shem Ben Tam. And when it says Rashi, they point out it's a mistake. It's not Rashi, because Rashi is the other Shita. It should be the Rush. The Ramah finishes off V'Noagin L'Hachmir Im Enu L'Tzarach Yom Tov L'Tzarach Orchim Ch'Yagavna D'Oz Noagin L'Hakel L'Acherim Shalahuva B'Shvilan. Based on a Trumas edition, he's saying that we're going to allow it for Acherim if it's not the Orchim of the one that was brought for them, because the Ramon takes on that if it was brought for the Orchim of, if it was brought for Ploni and he has Orchim, so then it's tantamount to be considered for him. It's to give it his Orchim that right now they're Sobach al Shulchano and they're planning to be eating at his house. So then to bring it to say to them as opposed to him, that's not considered a cherem, the Ramah holds, because that's the person himself is benefiting from that. So we'll go back to that point in a minute. But first, mitzvah the etzem machlokes. So we spoke out many times. We discussed the yesod of the machlokes between Rashi and Rebbeinu Tam. That according to Rebbeinu Tam, it's a gzera. That the whole Isra over here is a gzera shema yomar lo to do more things, and that's why the Rebbeinu Tam holds that gzera applies not only Yom Tov Rishon, also Yom Tov Sheni, because you get the benefit of Yom Tov Sheni. You might shema yomar lo, even if you can't use the Yom Tov Rishon, you might ask him to do it in order to get the benefit of Yom Tov Sheni. You wouldn't have it otherwise. So that's why he asers Rishon and Sheni ad b'chdei shiyasu. But according to Rashi, it's an Isra Hanoah be'etzem. It's not just a gzera. We had a question of where that came from. Where did the Isra of Hanoah come from? According to Rashi, we saw one side that maybe it's based on a lesson of the Rambam that Shabbos shouldn't be called ba'inov, and then you come in Chal Shabbos yourself. Or there's the Rashba we saw in Rashba in Erevin that learned up Rashi to answer the kasha from a mayor from Mavashal B'Shabbos, that we say that you're allowed to eat b'shogeg. So how could you eat b'shogeg if it's going to be you'd be nana from Melech Shabbos? So the Rashba answered that Rashi also holds that it's comes from the Gzera Shem Yomer Lo, and we're not worried about Shem Yomer Lo by another Yisrael. If a Yisrael is Mavashal B'Shogeg, you're not going to tell him he's not going to cook again afterwards. B'Mezid. He might be over Amir al-Akam, which is more kalba, that he might do, but to be over Mr. Shabbos himself is not going. We're not worried about that. So we see that the Rashba learns Rashi that it also is coming from Gzera Shem Yomer Lo. So then, if so, what's the machlokas? So we said according to the Rashba that even though the shoresh of the Gzera, the reason for it was the Sibus of Gzera was Shem Yomer Lo, but the getter of the Gzera, the way they typed it up, the way that they were magdir Chazal or Magdir the Isser was not just to remain just a dry Gzera, but they turned it into a Isser Hana, B'fnei Atzma, a separate Isser Hana. And so now we no longer look at the short, like we find often by Yisrael Rabbanan, that you no longer look at the reason for it, you look at the actual way that they were gozer it, the type of getter they put on it when they were gozer it. In this case, they're gozer Isser Hana, so you're not nene from Malacha was done in Yom Tov Rishon as long as you wait until after Yom Tov Rishon, even though it goes into Yom Tov Sheni. So we're not worried about the Shemer Yomer law anymore because that's not part of the Gzera in its final analysis, according to Rashi. That's how we learned. So we're going to see now, maybe perhaps the other nafkaminas in this Machlokas, but in Psak Halacha, so the Shulchan Aruch over here is paskening the Kula. Paskening is like Rashi. That's because that's the shita of Rov Rishonim. Rov Rishonim really go like Rashi, not like a Ben Tam. And that's the Psak of the Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah brings it down b'shem Yesh Machmirin. He brings down the Ben Tam, so it's a Chumrah the Ramah, which he's saying that the minig is to be Machmir. He's not saying the Psak is to be Machmir, the minig is to be Machmir. But to such a lashon of Yesh Machmirim and the minig Lachmir, so then that leaves room. First of all, we had Asr and Yisr Deraisa, we had Asr also Lacherim. In this case, we're saying that we're going to be Maftir Lacherim. Because we're the Rebbeinu Tam itself was only Machmir La'atzmoi. The way the Rosh learned Rebbeinu Tam, we spoke about this also, but the way the Rosh learns Rebbeinu Tam is that the Chumrah of Shemer Yomerlo is only shaykh to the person that it was Huva Bishvilo, only person that he brought for him. Only that person is gonna. He was brought from him once. He might turn around and ask the Goya to do it again. But for somebody else. So the Rosh learns that from somebody else, Mechatesi, the Goy should do something for me, for the second person. He doesn't know me. But so the only Kshash should be, he'll ask the Goy to do something more for the first guy. And that we say, in a person that's not going to be over an Avera of Amir L'Akum for the sake of somebody else, if he's not going to benefit from himself. So that's why there's no Isser La'acherim according to Ben Tam, the way the Rosh learns through Ben Tam. And that's what the Ramah seems to be saying over here. He's just qualifying, the Ramah is qualifying this by saying that it's only going to be for those who, Acherim, that are not Samach al Shulchan, the one that was brought for him, because that's tantamount to being for himself. The Taz over here has another explanation of Rashi, different than what we said. Just it's interesting over here with Megala, a whole other pshat in Rashi. And Rashi's Isser Hana, the Taz is bothered by why should there be an Isser Hana of Chil Shabbos, of the fact that it was done on Shabbos, the Isser. The Goy has absolutely no Isser. The Goy didn't do anything wrong at all. So why would there be an Isser of Shelo Yeneh that he shouldn't be netted from it if the Goy did absolutely nothing wrong? So Taz wants to say Nupshat and Rashi that the Isra Na is really because of Muktzah. He says Mshum Muktzah Naguba. And I mean it's because it's not shaykh. We said the Rashi's whole svara is that you can't be netted from Meleches Yom Tov. So the Taz says that what a Goy does is not called Meleches Yom Tov. But that's mitzad the Maisa, mitzad the Cheftza, mitzad the Chayfetz. So if it was Mechuber or it was Chasr Tzeda, so then even according to Rishim and the Paskins in Muktzah, but we say that Rishim is maskim by things that are Mechuber, Muktzah de Mechuber, because the Gemara says it's like Muktzah de Grogos et Smukim. It's like something that you're Dacha B'Yadayim. If you could have picked it before and you didn't, so it's like you're Dacha B'Yadayim, and that Rishim is maskim, that type of Muktzah. So, and the Chiddush is that Chazal were gozer, in this case, like B'mir L'Akum, they turned that Muktzah into a getter of Isser Hana. Now,
is that saying that it's a whole new idea of Amir L'Akum, that Amir L'Akum is based on nothing other than Muktzah?
No,
that the whole Isser being nene from, again, obviously getting them to.
No, so we always have to differentiate between the Isser of Amir L'Akum and the Isser to be nene from what he did.
Right.
Two separate things. We're
That's what I meant.
What he did. Now,
in regard to the right.
Yeah,
but in regard to the being nene.
That's all separate things. Here we're talking about the Isser Hana. What should be? The Rashi says it shouldn't be nene from Meleches Yom Tov. He's asking what kind of Meleches Yom Tov is there. So he's saying really, Enochanag Rashi Lav Dafka. It's a big dochak in Rashi, like it's a big dochak. But it's not really Melechas Yom Tov per se, but Rashi means to say, according to the Taz, that because a Melacha was necessary to make this available, then that turns it into Muktzah and they Asar Bahana. It's a big chiddush. So Rabbi Krieger, based on this Taz, as a steer on the Shulchan Aruch, that Mitzarecha, the Shulchan Aruch here is being makel. He's passing like Rashi, but the Svora, if the Yisoda Davar is because of Muktzah, so then the Shulchan Aruch in Taftzadi Hey Sif Daled, there's a machokus whether we say we paskin yesh muktzah or ein muktzah by Yom Tov. And the Shulchan Aruch is machmir, he holds yesh muktzah by Yom Tov. And so generally speaking, there should always be, when it's something we have sugyas that, like say if an esrog or atzei sukkah are around the corner now, that if it's something which is, we say the migudis katzoi, if let's say the 8th day is not really sukkahs, the 8th day is Shmini Atzeres in Eretz Yisrael, and so atzei sukkah or let's say all the fruits and things that are hung in the sukkah, or the esrog that's shekel 7 days, all those things are muktzah for you're not supposed to eat them or mishtamish them for your own tzarachim because they're hooks on the mitzvahs on during those 7 days. But the 8th day they're not. So why? But they remain muktzah on the 8th day as well because with paskin migudis katzoi ben ishmashas iskal yuma. It was ben ishmashas safek yom safek laila. The muktzah from the day before of hooks on the mitzvahs remains the whole 7th day, including ben ishmashas. So whatever happens ben ishmashas, then the ishmashas going into the 8th day, it was already muktzah ben ishmashas. Then we say migudis katzoi. Ben ishmashas is katzoi called yom kula. So then, if so, then Rabbi Krieger asked that since the Shulchan Aruch passes that over on that Yom Tov, by all muktzah Yom Tov we say migudis katzoi, then how can the Shulchan Aruch paskin over here that's going to be mutter on the 2nd day after Mechtei Shiyasu on the 1st day? If the Isser Hana that he's paskin like Rashi is because of muktzah, which Rabbi Krieger seems to accept that, then how can it be mutter the 2nd day? We should say migudis katzoi ben ishmashas to be also the whole day. Rabbi Krieger remains with the kasha on this. So I mean, Lula de Mustafina, Rabbi Krieger asks the kasha. Then when you try to answer it, then you have to say, okay, what did Rabbi Krieger hold? But the kasha seems to be a little tamua because we paskin lahedya. It's a Gemara in Beitza that Beitza it's a machokus in the Gemara. By 2 days of Yom Tov in Galus, a Beitza shenolda bazeh, is it mutter bazeh or asur bazeh? If a Beitza was born, not hatched, but it was laid. Sorry, on the 1st day of Yom Tov, we paskin that it's mutter on the 2nd day, because we say that the way we're supposed to look at Yom Tov Sheni is that we look at both days like it's a suffix. Which day is Chol or Yom Tov? Even though today we know we already Kaveya, Kviyas Yarcha, we have a calendar. You can call it Manischewitz and know exactly when Yom Tov is. It's all right there on the calendar, and we don't have any sfikas anymore. But the Ritva in Rosh Hashanah and the Ritva in a few places, and many Rosh Hashanah say this, is that the way that Chazal were misaken the Gzeres Yom Tov Sheni was to look, even though we know Bavade now, to look at as if we're still in the Supak, as if we still have a suffix. So there's a lot to, if we do know, so how can we look at like a suffix? What does that really mean? The Chazon Ish, the way he learns in the Rambam, it seems to be that he takes on more that it's like B'toras Vadai, the 2 days. He seems to learn the Rambam that it's not to look at it like it's Supak both days. It's Machos from Chaim and the Chazon Ish and the Rambam. So that could really be what's going on over here with the Rabbi Krieger and the Shulchan Aruch, that the Rabbi Krieger seems to hold that if we have Vadai 2 days of Yom Tov over here, because we know for sure it's a Torah's Vadai, so then if it's Asr one day, Migdis Katsoy should be also the next day. Masha Enken, the Shulchan Aruch was probably going to be learning that somehow this is similar to the sugya of Beitza Shnolda B'zeh Muteres B'zeh, because if we're supposed to look at it like every day is Klapi, the 2nd day is like if today's Kodesh, then yesterday was Chol, right? And the 2nd day, and the 1st day you say if today's Kodesh, tomorrow is Chol. So each day when you get to it, you say today's Kodesh and the day before or the day after is Chol. So then it's not B'toras Vadai, not like Rosh Hashanah, whatever B'toras Vadai, it's B'toras Suffix. So that's Nichal on the Suffix that we're not going to say Migdus Katsoy, because if it was Muktzah today, then when it goes into the next day, copy that Ben Ishmashis, we say the next day is like a Yom Chol. So then, for that reason, the Shulchan Aruch is not saying Mius, which would be then a raya that Rashi holds this way as well, which would be very Geshmak. And I feel bad I didn't know this when I wrote Yom Tov Sheni. Could have added this in. This for Krieger is totally in that machlokas over there, that Shiloh. So that's what Chalal say. The Divrei Torah Aniyim b'makom hazeh v'ashirim b'makom acher. So you pick up a new holy yesod somewhere else, completely off the beaten path, and that's Megala back, the pshat and what's going on over there in another place. If you haven't seen Sefer Yom Tov Sheni, it's highly recommended. Okay, so Yom Tov Sheni Kalachazon. Most of you have met the author. Okay. Now, that was just a quick station break, for commercial break. Okay, now getting back to the Ramah over here. Excuse me. No, the Taz. Just getting back to the Taz. The Taz says that this Trumas Hadeshin that the Ramah brings down is going to be mutter for Echerim as long as they're not eating by you. So the Ramah is based on the Beis Yosef, the way the Beis Yosef learned this Trumas Hadeshin, and the way the Beis Yosef says it is that we're matir l'Echerim. Why are we matir for Echerim over here? When there's a need, when it's the Tzorach Orchim, for as long as they're not the Tzorach Orchim of that guy that it was brought for. So the Beis Yosef says that we're basically combining a couple. We're mitzaref a couple kulas over here. That mitzad echad, you could say, like according to Rashi, we're talking now about the second day of Yom Tov. We're matir for the second day, and what the Ramah is saying is in the shita of Rabbeinu Tam that's machmer for the second day, we're allowed to be mekel for orchim, and that's the Trumas Hadeshin, as long as it's the right orchim. So the Beis Yosef says the pshat is that it's a tziruf that according to Rashi is mutzar completely even for himself. And so so it's sort of like a pshara over here to be matzir for acherim. The pshat is based on the fact that according to Rashi, really meikra din rov v'shanim whole like Rashi is mutzar for himself. So then we can be mekel at least for orchim. That's the way the Shulchan Aruch learns. But that's why the Beis Yosef learns. That's why the Ramah says that Rashi is only a tziruf over here, the hakel. So that's why we can't be mekel for the orchim of this guy himself, because for him we're still being machmer. But the Taz learns a little bit differently, the Trumas Hadeshin, and the way he learns is that really because Rashi is the ikar din. Rov v'shanim are like Rashi. That's really the ikar psak. We're just adding a chumrah to that. So, in that being that the case, then b'makom tzarach gadol, the Taz wants to say that even for himself it should be mutar, even for himself to eat it. And kosher can la'acherim, even if there's some al shulchano. So the Taz is cholak on this Ramah, and the Achronim seem to really go with the Taz more in this case. Mishnah Brura and the Aruch HaShulchan, others, the Magen Avram over here also seems to go that way. The Magen Avram, with the Mishnah Brura and the Aruch HaShulchan are really explaining the Magen Avram, that Magen Avram says that once it's mutter, once we're determining that the heter la'acherim is going to be even for the orchim that are some al-shulchano, because the ikar din is real like Rashi. So if this guy was brought for him, now it's up to Sheni, and he's serving it for the orchim, then the Magen Avram says that once you serve your orchim, then you're allowed to eat with them as well. And the way the Aruch HaShulchan explains the Magen Avram, it turns out to be very interesting Musar vort as well. He says that it's not derech eretz that you should serve orchim and you should not sit down and eat with them. And Mishnah Brura adds a lashon. He says it a little bit differently. Mishnah Brura says that it's a chelik of mitzvahs achnasas orchim, that when they eat, that you should also participate with them. You shouldn't make them feel uncomfortable that they're eating and you're not. So there's a lot of interesting ramifications to this on the side, but you just see over here a very interesting psak halacha based on derech eretz or achnasas orchim, that we matir a suffix over here, suffix iser, which, or the way the Taz will say it is that we're going to, even though there's a chumas or ben tam, but we're going to go back to the ikar din, which is like Rashi, because of the svara of derech eretz or achnasas orchim, to say that you can eat it together with him. Yeah.
Sorry, we're talking about which day of Yontif? The second day?
Second day.
I thought to Rashi anyways, it's okay. Because,
yes, that's the thing. We're saying that the Ramah is saying a pshara within the Chumrah Rabbeinu Tam. So the Shah is, what is the Ramah really paskin over here? So the Beis Yosef learns that it seems to be like we're machar Rabbeinu Tam, but we have a siruf of Rashi also, so we'll matzah orchim. The Taz switches it around. He's saying, no, the Ramah means that the ikar din is like Rashi. That's Rav Rishonim. Just as a Chumrah Rabbeinu Tam, you should be machmir, but b'makom tzara gadol, it should be mutter afla didei. And then on that, the Magen Avram is saying that once it's mutter, the other way he says that we'll be matir it. The Taz will matir it even for the orchim of him, the orchim of this guy, not like the Ramah says. And the Magen Avram adds to that once you give to the orchim, then you'll be able to eat yourself. So it's like it seems like we're basically going back to the ikar din of Rashi. We're using the svara of hachnas orchim or derech eretz to be machriya back to the ikar din, to go off the chumrah of ben tam and allow him to eat with them. So it's not like we're being, it's like not one of these, if there's a rabbinical will, there's rabbinical, that's like divrei kfira. It's not like, it's not nice, so therefore we're going to just be mvatar and isra over here. No, it's because the Taz is learning and the Magen Ramsey is learning that the ikar din is really like Rashi. It's really is mutter for himself on the second day. Rashi wasn't talking about a cherem, he was talking about himself. It's mutter b'chteshi yasu for himself to eat it. So we're going to be machmer like ben tam, but if we have these reasons like tzarach gadol for Yom Tov or orchim, so then we're going back to the ikar din of Rashi and allowing him to eat it himself as well. Now, at the end of the Shulchan Aruch in Sif Aleph, he paskins that we had a shaila in Rishonim, a big shaila in the Tur, Beis Yosef. What is the Shiur b'chtei shiyasu? How long do we need to wait for b'chtei shiyasu? Do we go by how long it takes to do that particular malacha? However long that is, and we ignore how long it took to transport the goods from wherever it was to this Jew, or do we have to add in, since the hana you're getting from it is also from the fact that you're saving all the time that it would take for you to get it from wherever it's made. If you want apples and apples are only the next city over, and it's an hour's walk, so then you're also marviach that hour of the walk if the goy brought it on for you on Yom Tov. So that was a major shal in Rishonim, and the Shulchan Aruch over here goes l'chumra. Shulchan Aruch at the end of Sifala says, "B'chtei shiyasu v'shir b'chtei shiyasu k'dei shiyasu hainu k'dei sheyelech ha'akum la'makom sheliket v'yigmor ha'malacha v'yachzor lekan." Because there's really a two-way revach over here. The goy has time how long it would take to go there and get it and come back to where you are. So all that is mitzaref to the b'chtei shiyasu. If you're not sure, then you go by mechutz utchun. So I have a very big kasha which I don't have an answer to, which is that we explained in the previous shiurim that this shaila of how long you have to wait for b'chtei shiyasu also should be totally in the machlokas Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. That if you hold that pshat and b'chtei shiyasu is like Rashi says, shelo yenem mimlachas Yom Tov, and we're not concerned with Shema Yomer Lo, we just look at the etzem hana for what has done on Yom Tov. So according to Rashi, it would be clear that that's the lumdus of the tzad, that you don't have to pay attention to how long it took to bring it or to bring it back. The Shiur Halicha has nothing to do with it, because that's not the Etzem Hana of the Meleches Yom Tov. We have to focus on just the Etzem Meleches Yom Tov. You should be nana from that Melecha. That's the Svar of Rashi. So Rashi would be the Shita that you only have to wait as long as it takes to perform the Melecha, not to transport the object. But according to Rebbeinu Tam, that we always look at the revach that you're going to get. If you're maviach a certain amount of time, just like Yom Tov Sheni, you're maviach Yom Tov Sheni also, even though it's past the time of being nana from the malacha, but you're being maviach the fact that you might tell him to do it next time for Yom Tov Sheni because you're maviach a whole day of Yom Tov Sheni. So because Shema Yomer Lo is the ikras for us. So also the Shema Yomer Lo should include the transporting time, because you're maviach all that time, so you might tell them to do it in order to maviach those extra hours of the transporting it. So then the Shulchan Aruch,
are we looking at the travel time not as a part of the nene for Ma'aseh Yom Tov?
Because it's not a Ma'aseh Yom Tov. It's like
the key.
Pardon?
Right. It's like the key, bringing the key to open the door. So you're being nene from something that's not the actual direct.
Right, it's not the actual thing. Yeah. Right. So now l'chora, it's according to our cheshbon, it's l'chora steer minei obey in the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch we just saw paskins like Rashi, that before in the beginning of the sif, that it's mutter b'chtei shiyasu an leil yom tov sheni, which that's the ikar nachmina of Tosfos and Rashi. So we see the Shulchan Aruch is going like she does Rashi, and that's the whole lumdus we just said in the Ramah, and the kula of the Achronim to be nena from it himself, because the ikar din is like Rashi. So it's really mutter b'yom tov sheni according to Shulchan Aruch mikar din. and with the cheshbon of the Trumas Hadeshin and everything. But so now, how can the Shulchan Aruch turn around and be machmir for the Shiur Halicha? To be consistent, the Shulchan Aruch should have only aser b'chtei shiyasu, the amount that it takes to perform the malacha. So I didn't get a chance to look in other achronim to see if anybody asked this kasha, but so I just right now remain b'tzorachiyun, and hopefully I'll find an answer to this. But it seems mamish like a steer b'nei obey, really very, very bothersome within the Shulchan Aruch itself. Okay, we'll go on to Sif Beis. It says, "Afilu talshan akum o tzadan la'atzmai." If the tlisha of the Paris were done by the akum for himself, oh nafa min ilan mi'atzmai, or even it wasn't in malacha done at all. It was just fell off. An apple fell off the tree, and it didn't fall far from the tree. Okay, so. Oh, natsud miatzmo, or it got trapped on its own, like you just put a trap out. Put a trap before Yom Tov, and then go ahead and got caught it in itself in the trap. Asr la'aklo bo b'yon l'tatalo after mishalo huva b'shviloi. So if there's an iser of tiltal, achila or tiltal, even for who it was not brought for. Avol erev mutarim miyad ben l'tz Yom Tov after mishalo. It's afterwards, because since no malacha was done, nobody did a malacha to it for the sake of a Jew over here at all. So that's why it's mutter miyad. Now the sibas isra over here is because of muktzah. Right? This is the Gemara says that, like we said before, anything which is mechuber, it's called muktzah de mechuber. That even Rishim is mutter to that muktzah. He says generally in muktzah, but he's moeded by muktzah and mechuber because it's considered like dacha b'yadayim. Anything you could have picked and you didn't pick, it's as if you like grogas at smukim arosh gag. That's the prototype according to Rishimon of all muktzah that he holds in muktzah. If you took the dried figs and dates and you put them on your roof to dry, the fact that you put them up there for the sake of drying and they're still until they've gotten to that dry state, it's called dachi b'yadayim. It's like you push that out of the realm of being used for Yom Tov or Shabbos, and that becomes muktzah. So anything that you could have used or could have picked from the tree and you didn't, where Shimon holds that has the same status as Daka B'Yadayim. That's one svara over here why it's Asr, but that's also why it's Mutter even Miyad without B'Chtei Shiasu, because no Malacha was done. It's just a pure Isser Muktzah. The Mishnah Berurah just adds that from the Sugi in the beginning of Beitza, there's also a Isser over here of Gzeres Shem Yalav Yitlosh. We say that by all Paris, which, if you remember, we saw from Tosas that has two Tanayim to it. Tosas learned there was two Tanayim, the Gzeres Shem Yalav Yitlosh. One is that it's easy to do. It's easy just to pick off an orange or an apple from a tree. And number two, it's midid achila. It's a Michael. It's something that lohut achrayim, that people are drawn to it, and they want to pull it. You're hungry and it looks really good. They pull into it. That was Tosas Shita. And we saw from the Mordechai, he split it up that he made those two Tanayim into a Machlokes Rishonim, whether the Iker Tanai is that it's food at lohut achrayim, even if it's not so easy to do, or if it's easy to do, even if it's not food necessarily. It's not something which lohut achrayim. Akapanim, the Shabur adds in over here that besides Isser Muktzah, there's also a Gzera of Shem Yitlosh. Now the Magen Avraham points out, like we said, the Magen Avraham says that even the Yesh Machmirim before that it's Asr until Motzi Yom Sheni. There's even according to Rabbeinu Tam that was Machmir by Paris that were brought to Yom Rishon, they're Asr until Motzi Yom Sheni. That's only when a malacha was done for the possibly for the sake of a Jew. But if you did it la'atzmo or it fell off on its own, no malacha was done for a Jew over here, then even Rabbeinu Tam is moda, it's going to be mutter b'yom sheni. Now Rabbi Kiveger over here asks a kasha that he just basically a kasha on musagim of two separate halachas over here, that why is this different than hachnasa mechutz l'tchum? We said that if there was hachnasa mechutz l'tchum, it was done for the sake of a it was nasa wa iser d'Rabbanan for the sake of Yisrael. Like was in a case where, let's say, the goy he even picked it for himself, but then he brought it mechutz l'tchum. So that was an iser d'Rabbanan for a Jew to do it, and we're machmir, and that's asur for Yisrael. And according to the Yesh Machmirim, we said that's asur until not only Yom Rishon that it brought it, but also until Motzi Yom Sheni, according to Rabbeinu Tam. Here also, if it fell on its own, or it was done by a goy for his own sake, so it became muktzah on Yom Tov. So, like, if after, let's say it fell off it fell off the tree by itself, and then a goy brought it to you. So the goy was over. Not that there's an issur for a goy, like we said all along, but a goy did a ma'aseh that for Yisrael will be an issur of tiltal muktzah. There will be an issur d'Rabbanan involved. And here we're saying that by this issur d'Rabbanan, it's mutter, but mutzah Yom Tov Rishon, even according to Rabbeinu Tam. Right? Again, the Magen Avraham says that even according to Rabbeinu Tam, it's machmir by hava chutz l'tchum. Here he's mekel, the mutzah Yom Tov Rishon, it's mutter, like Rashi. So Rick Veger is just asking that my shna one d'Rabbanan from another d'Rabbanan. The isser of hatzah mechutz l'tchum is an isser d'Rabbanan. So the goy picked it for himself, and then he decided to bring it to a Jew. Then we say he brought him chutz l'tchum. Since he was over that chutz l'tchum, something would be asur for Yisrael. It's asur until Motzi Yom Tov Sheni, according to Rabbeinu Tam. And now we're saying, though, however, if it fell off on its own and the guy just brought it, so even though it's tiltal muktzah, and the first day it's for sure muktzah, there's muktzah to mechuber, like we just said, and we're according to Shimon. So then my shna one d'Rabbanan from the other. Why is Magen Avraham assuming that this d'Rabbanan will be mutter, but mutzah Yom Tov Rishon according to Rabbeinu Tam? Why is the tiltal muktzah more kal than hatzah mechutz l'tchum? Because they're both d'Rabbanans.
Can't you say that the whole reason why Rabbeinu Tam says it's asur is because of the revach that you might go and ask the guy to do it? If it falls by itself, Rabbeinu Tam has no reason to say that it would be asur.
Well, it'll fall by itself, or if the guy picked it for himself, the Shulchan Aruch says. He just picked the Tochat Chum.
The Shulchan Aruch, the Shulchan Aruch says that it's
Tolshem
of
Ma'akum.
the Ayin Yehudi. Right.
The goy was Tolshem.
But again, there's
the only difference
there's
between
less Rebbe.
the only difference between the two sifrim is Chutz Tchum. But here, right?
Right.
He picked the apple in Sif Beis just like he picked it in Sif Aleph. Just that Sif Aleph he brought it in Chutz Tchum, and here he picked it for himself inside the Tchum, and then he brought it to the Jew. So why over here? Let's say he's inside the Tchum, but it's a big city. He's an hour away within the Tchum. So now, why shouldn't the Jew have to wait that hour? Because the Issur D'Rabbanan of Tiltal Muktzah was transgressed to bring it to him. Why shouldn't he have to wait that hour? Why is Manishtana one D'Rabbanan from the other D'Rabbanan L'Gavi B'Chtei Shiyasu? That's what Kveger's kasha here on the Magen Avram. So he remains a Tzarech Yiyun. I don't have an answer for that. And you have to start exploring, that Chutz Tchum maybe it was more Chomer. Just conjecturing, Lulei Kveger, that maybe Chutz Tchum is more Chomer because there is such a thing as Tiltal Deraisa when it's outside Yud Bei's mill. When it's not outside Tchum, when it's outside Yud Bei's mill, there's the Machlokes Rishonim, Machlokes in the Gemara, Machlokes Rishonim. Some hold that that's Mamish and Issur Deraisa. So there is a type of Haitzah even though it's not dealing with Rosh Hashanah or anything like that, it's just because of it's so far away that there are those that hold that's a deraisa. So even though right now you're not being over a deraisa, maybe it's like based on that deraisa in some way, and therefore they were more machmer by it than Tiltal Muktzah. Tiltal Muktzah, there's never an Issur Deraisa. Tiltal Muktzah is totally completely an Issur D'Rabbanan. There are shittas that hold that Achilas Muktzah might be an Issur Deraisa. That's in the sugi in the beginning of Beitza, the Hachana de Rabbah, something is missing Hachana. It wasn't Huchan before Shabbos or Yom Tov. Then Rabbah holds Hachana de Rabbah. Rabbah holds that there's an Issur Deraisa. It says that Echinu es Asher Aviu. Whoever you bring it to eat has to be Muchan before. If it's missing in Muchan, then that might be an Issur Deraisa. That's inside Achila, but inside Tiltal, there's nobody that holds that Tiltal is an Issur Deraisa. There's no such thing. So perhaps the Tiltal Muktzah that was done by the Goy is not going to have the same chumrah as Hava Michutz Tchum, which maybe has some type of a Shorish Deraisa, because there is a type of Hava which is Deraisa, and maybe that's there were Chazal were more machmer in that. But you need a raya to say that. The raya against it is Rabbi Kveger asked the kasha and didn't answer that. So, but it's worth exploring that, possibly that shaila. Now, this Isra Muktzah over here, that we find that it can't be. The Shulchan Aruch says, "Asur le'echlo be'bayom u'lataltalo." It's Isra of tiltal, achila or tiltal until Motzei Yom Tov Rishon. Now, if you remember, we saw in Shin Chaf Hey, based on the sugya in Shabbos that we learned, the sugya in Kuf Chaf Beis, of Michael the Asavim, that the goy was tolish the Asavim, the grass for his behema. You're allowed to let that be eaten by your animal, even though the goy was tolish those Asavim on Shabbos or Yom Tov, which tolish la'atzmai, which should be tantamount over here picking the fruit la'atzmai. And over there we're matir to let your animal eat it, and over here we're saying that it's an Isra Tiltal Muktzah. So if you remember, we learned over there that the only way it's mutter is if you direct your animal to it, but you're not nageya yourself. Because over there also we said there's taka and Isra with Tiltal Muktzah. And if so, then what's the chiddush over there? If we already know the halach over here, that we should figure that ourselves. The chiddush is that by Isra Muktzah they weren't gozer and Isra Hana mamish. If they're gozer mamish and Isra Hana on every muktzah over here, then it would be usher even to feed it, let your animal eat it, because you're being nena from it, from the fact your animal's eating. So the Isra Muktzah is not an Isra Hana, which takes us back to understand that Taz. That Taz holds the whole Yisod of the Isra Hana over here is because of Muktzah. That becomes more difficult. So to try to reconcile the two shitas, the two sugyas, why, according to the Taz, if so, then why is it mutter to let your animal eat the asavim over there? So according to the Taz, we have to differentiate between the person himself and his animal. Maybe it goes by the person, but not by everything else of the person by extension. Like the Taz himself was matir to have or the orchim of the person eat, even though the person is nana from it. So anyway, but that's not a right because that's Yom Tov Sheni. Al Kapana, the Taz seems to be a little more difficult. With the Taz's Hezbollah of Rashi, which already was difficult, it's already tamu a little bit to explain Rashi. This are not because of Muktzah. A Shala Lamaisa over here, which very Nagel Lamaisa, which this year may be a little less Nagel Lamaisa, but to a certain extent it is, that there's a fascinating Shala if a Ben Chutz La'aretz is in Eretz Yisrael for Sukkos. So a lot of people have a minhag in Eretz Yisrael to take new arabas every day, new fresh arabas every day, and they're out there selling them every day. And you have a Ben Chutz La'aretz, which his lulav, the arabas aren't so geshmak anymore, and now it's second day Yom Tov, and people are outside with arabas. His cousin is out there selling them also, so he could pick up a couple of them that morning to put in his lulav on the way to shul to daven and his Yom Tov Sheni minyan in Yerushalayim. But his cousin, they cut them every day to have them fresh. They go out to their arabas trees and they cut them off every morning, early in the morning, to have them there to sell before shul. So the arabas were cut on Yom Tov Sheni. So is it Ben Chutz La'aretz allowed to use the arabas that have been Eretz Yisrael cut for Bnei Eretz Yisrael on Yom Tov Sheni? So that's l'chora tantamount to a goy that picked the fruit latzmo, which we say is usher on that. If you picked it on that day, it's usher on that day. It's muktzah. So in Sefer Yom Tov Sheni, in the first Madura, I brought a psak that I heard from Shlomo Zalman. That's all. That it's okay. It's mutter to rename it for those. So there was a rub from the Badatz wrote a long tshuva to me against that, and many kashas on that. And watch it should be muktzah like we see over here. Like this is how could it be? Why should it be any different than over here? And so Shlomo Zalman answered his kashas, and I wrote back to him, and he wrote another tshuva, and this went back like 2 or 3 times. So finally, Shlomo Zalman asked me to give me all we've written on this and said on this, and one of the last times in his life, his family went bananas because for years he hadn't done this already because he was gotten weak. But he used to lock himself in a room for a few days and not come out and write a long tshuva. So he did this for one of the last times he came out, and he said, "Here, I wrote you a little something," and he gave me a whole pack of papers that he wrote on this shaila, and now it's printed now in Mincha Shlomo. In his tshuvas, that he answered up and slugged up everything that this person, he said he was very excited. He was very happy that he kept writing kashas. He said, "Oh, that's the way it should be. That's the way it used to be. Dakar Shal Torah, you don't just give in so easy. Very good. Tov Moed," he said, that he's fighting this. But then he said, "Give me all the tshuvas, and I'm gonna listom pihem. I'm going to close the mouths of all those that are trying to ask kashas on this anymore. Write one tshuva and just put the issue to bed." And he wrote a long tshuva on this and came out l'hakel based on a svara that in Eretz Yisrael, that the reason that part of the svara he said is that the peiros that are on Shabbos or Yom Tov, there's no Jew that's able to pick those on Shabbos or Yom Tov. So then you have a muktzah Reb Shimon. If you didn't pick it before Yom Tov, then you have a svara. It's like grog, it's smukim. It's like your dachim yadayim. It's like you pushed it off and it became muktzah. You didn't take it. Mashenkin in Eretz Yisrael, all of the arabas in Eretz Yisrael are omed likteif. They're omed to be cut off, and for Bnei Eretz Yisrael because it's not Yom Tov for them. So in the makom that all the yidden there are able to cut it and they're omed to be cut. So then then they actually were cut. So then it's no longer muktzah. And now it's going to be mutter for a Ben Chutz La'aretz to be nene from the fact that the Ben Eretz Yisrael did that beheter, and there's no mukum ligzor or anything like that because the Ben Eretz Yisrael is totally beheter. And we don't find the same xeras of Amir La'akum it's a chiddush because there never was such a thing in the time of poskim of Bnei Chutzlaretz, Bnei Eretz Yisrael. That's a whole mechudishtik matzah that we have now. There were never gozer this gzera of Shema Yomer Lo by a Bnei Eretz Yisrael from a Ben Chutzlaretz. So I'm just very quickly being makatzer, but it's a beautiful tshuva to go through. He's makif a huge part of Hilchos Muktzah in that tshuva. It's an amazing thing the way he's, the godless of Shlomo Zalman and be matcha this halacha. Yeah.
In Mistama, it should come out even if the Ben Chutzlaretz asks. It should still be okay, no? Because if we're understanding that it's not muktzah, so what would be the problem? Would it be like a gezerah shema?
Because the Ben Chutzlaretz still can't ask a Ben Eretz Yisrael to perform malacha on Yom Tov. That everybody agrees. I mean, the question is why. So that's a whole separate tshuva why that's so. But we're differentiating between the Amira and the nene from what the person did. So we paskin that there is an Isra of Amira from Ben Chutzlaretz to Ben Eretz Yisrael Yom Tov. Shal is why it's in Ayin Sefer Yom Tov. There's a long tshuva from Shlomo Zalman, a long tshuva from El Yoshev, that they have two completely different mahalkim and why that's so. Shlomo Zalman basically holds it's part of the same Isra of Mir Lakum, and El Yoshev holds that it's nichlal in the Isra of Mintzol Cheftzach Abadaber Davar. You're only allowed to speak about things you're allowed to do yourself on Shabbos and Yom Tov. So you can't tell somebody to do something you can't do yourself. But they both agree there's an Isra Amira, and now there's a separate Shaila. If you already did it, is there an Isra to Minena from it? Or the Minena from it, and that's one Shaila. The second, which that everybody agrees you could, but here's the second Shaila, it's a little more chomor, and that's what the whole back and forth was about, is should there be an Isra Muktzah over here? Because sof kol sof, it was muktzah to mechuber. That's an empirical Isra Muktzah. That how do we get around that? And that Rosh Zalman, he had the broad shoulders to say no, that all the Aravos in Eretz Yisrael are Omed Liktof, so there's no Isra Muktzah even according to Reb Shimon. We possibly like on in Chol HaMoed in Eretz Yisrael, even though it's Yom Tov Sheni for Bnei Chutzlaretz that are visiting there. I was looking at the deer shoe over here, the Mishabura. I wasn't thinking of that shaila in context of this halacha, but I was looking at the deer shoe just on the Mishabura, and I saw a long piece, the name of Shlomo Zalman. I looked a little further, and I thought, where did this come from? I said, oh, it's from Sefer Yom Tov Sheni. I remember the whole shaila. So, okay, Sif Gimel. A feeling who safek in milkatu or nitzodu hayon, even the safek it's a Asurim, we still answer it, even misafek. If they were, like the person say, if it was kamushim, like you got the fruits they brought are already a little bit kamush, they're a little bit shriveled. So obviously not picked today. Then they're mutar, because we only have a problem of hatzal chutzot. We don't have a problem of shema. It was picked for them today. If it didn't come with chutzot, it's mutar for everybody now. Because you have no problem. You don't have a problem with tchum, and you don't have a problem of shema nilkatu hayom, because it's clear minei ubei that wasn't the case. So the Shulchan Aruch here is so same that suffix is usher, and the fact that he didn't differentiate between the previous halachas, it's mashma over here that when it is usher, when it is a suffix, whether it was nitzod today or fik today, then it's usher b'motzi yom tov abikdei shiyasu, because she's just continuing from the previous halachas. So it won't just be usher today; it'll be usher. Suffix will be usher also ad bikdei shiyasu. That's all the post can say. Now Magen Avraham asks over here, the Shulchan Aruch is sosem is usher until bikdei shiyasu. In the Siman Shin Chaf Hey Sif Zayin we saw previously, there the Shulchan Aruch brought 2 days. He said he brought down for Yesh Misha Matir B'Safek Muchan he brought a Yesh and he brought a shita that holds like it says over here, but he brought another shita over there that is Matir B'Safek Muchan on Motzei Shabbos Miyad. So of course it's a steer in Shulchan Aruch that over there it's 2 days, which sounds like there's what to rely on in the case of need, and over here he just left it as it's usher, period, because he's continuing from the previous halachos. So Magen Avraham answers that in Shin Chaf Hey, we're talking about a case where it's be'emes suffik muchan. It's an equal suffix. It's yes or no, if it was muchan or not, if it was picked or not, is an even playing field. It's a suffix gomer. And since it's a real suffix, that's why there are those that are matir. Mashakin over here by Meviu Daron, the whole sugi over here, the Shulchan was going on is a Nachish Shehevi Daron. He brought a gift to a Jew. So the stam, the default, or either brought it as a gift or he brought it to sell, one of the two. So in both cases, the default position, if you don't know otherwise, is that the goy for sure want to bring something fresh, as fresh as could be, because if you want to bring a gift, you want to bring the best gift. You don't want to bring a withered, used gift. You want to bring a good fresh geschmacka basket of fruit to the guy. You're not going to bring something from yesterday. Those days, remember, no refrigeration. So the stama is that it was likto hayom, unless you know otherwise, that it should be fresh. And that's why, since that's the stam, that's the assumption, that's why that's why, unless you know otherwise, we stay with that assumption and we asar b'kdesh yasu. It's only over there that there's a stark tzad, there's a good possibility that he really didn't do it today, then Chazal warrant goes to the isar b'kdesh yasu according to one opinion. So that's the chiluk between here and Shin Chafei. Now the Mishnah Berurah, based on a lashon of the Magen Avraham, has been medayek further to add a little bit more of a teretz over here as well. Is that here we're talking about that the goy picked it for himself, and then he decided to bring it for the Jew. Actually, I think it should work the other way. Let me think how this works. Here we're talking the guy picked it for himself. Now the suffix is whether it was picked today or not. So since all there is an Isra Muktzah, let me look at this for a second. It doesn't seem to be working. A second. It's not working for me right now. Yeah, so I'll have to think more about the second teretz, but the first teretz, that's clearly what the Magen Avraham says. We'll have to think more about the Mishnah Berurah. Now the Mishnah Berurah explains back in Shin Chaf Hey that what's the beer of this machlokes of if it's a suffix gomer, that there's a machlokes whether there's an isur b'kdesh yasu or not. That the Hora, there's a kasha on the whole thing. There's a kasha on this whole etzem din over here. That why are we machmir b'kdesh yasu b'makom suffik? The Hora, what happened to the klal of suffik drabanan lakula? Sacred drabanan lakula. So why, if there's a chance that he did it for himself, and which if he did it for himself totally, then it should be like the din of Sif Beis that we say it's mutar miyad. So then why should there even be tzad by a makom suffik? Why should there be an isser? Which would explain the shita that's mekel makom suffik. The shita that's mekel makes a lot of sense because suffik drabanan lakula. So this extra isser drabanan of b'kdesh yasu, if it's a suffix, then the chor they shouldn't be goes with that. The gzera should fall off. Suffix drabanan lakula. So what's the tzad l'hachmir over here? Why not be mekel? Why not say suffix drabanan lakula? So Mishnah Berurah and Shin Chaf Hey Sivkat Lamed Beis, he answers that our sugi over here, this whole shiloh over here is a davar shesh l'matirin. Davar shesh l'matirin is something which is usher now, but it's going to become mutter anyway on its own. So we find this in Yerodea, the davar shesh l'matirin, like if you have something, if something is like a taruvis that fell in, so or you have a lot of stekas and things are mixed together, So we say if it's a Davar Sheshel Matirin, is not Batal, Fila Be'elef. There's no Bittel if you know to 1,000. And the Sfor over there is, they're trying to say that, that why be Samach and Bittel to be matter it now when it's going to be mutter completely on its own right. So let's say Chametz is also a Fila Be'elef, Chametz falls in Pesach. Because since the Chametz is going to be mutter after Pesach, it's not Batal now, Fila Be'elef. That's the prototype of Davar Sheshel Matirin. So over here also, if we're not sure if this was brought on Yom Tov or not, so this becomes a Davar Sheshel Matirin. It's going to be mutter on Motzei Yom Tov. So since it's going to be mutter, so then the klal is by Davar Sheshel Matirin, we don't look at sfekas. We're not makel based on sfekas. We don't say Savad Rabban Lakula by something which is going to be mutter on its own anyway. If so, then what's the svara of the makilim? Then why is there, if Davar Sheshel Matirin, what's the svara of those that are makel? The other shita over there. So the Sharat Tzion says over there, in Oslam at Hay, in the name of the Shulchan Aruch HaRav, that since the whole reason that they asked it was mitam gzeira, it's not a real Isra Hana, but it's a tam gzeira, then they weren't going to be machmir to colleagues, to the dinim of the chumrah b'kdei yasu. That's by a thing that's asur b'cheftza. It's an actual isser. So that we're going to say it's a Davar Sheshel Matirim. This thing that's asur now is going to be mutter later. Then we don't say stekas by it. We don't say bittul by it. By something which the whole mahus of it is only a gzeira. There's no isser cheftza at all. It's just a gzeira shem yomerlo on this thing. So then on that we're not going to say, and on that it doesn't apply the svaras of Davar Sheshel Matirin. That's what the Mishnah says over there. So if that's the case, then comes out a very fascinating new nafkamina between what we've been talking about all along, the Machlokes Rashi and Tosas. This Machlokes Rashi and Tosas, whether it's an Isser Be'etzem, it's an Isser Hana, or it's just an Isser Shem Yomerlo. So now, as another new fascinating nafkamina, and those two svaras, or that's goof what the Mishnah Berurah over there in Shin Hafei is saying, that's going to be the Kudas HaMachlokas, whether we aser b'chtei shiyasu because of Davar Sheshel Matirin. If you hold that it's an Isser Be'etzem, it's an Isser Hana, and right, so this Cheftza became a Davar She'aser B'Hana. And if so, then on that we'll say Davar Sheshel Matirin, it has a chumr to it. We're not going to say Seked Rabbanan Lakula by it. It's going to be Aser b'chtei shiyasu. Masha'enken, if you hold it's just a Gzeira, like Rabbeinu Tam, it remains purely a Gzeira and never became an Isser Cheftza, so then on that doesn't apply the Svara of Davar Sheshel Matirin. Okay, at the end of the halacha here, in Sif Gimel, the Ramah says that Akol Nesiach L'Fitumo Shel Nilkat Hayom or Nitzar Hayom Neman. A goy over here is Neman to say whether it was picked today or picked yesterday, picked before B'Yom Chol, he's Neman. We say Nesiach L'Fitumo, which we find this by various halachas. The general klal is that Nesiach L'Fitumo, we rely on that by D'Rabbanans, not by D'Oraisas. So now it's interesting. The Taz says over here the reason is he's Neman because what I just said now. The Magen Avram learns that the reason is he's Neman because it's a Shala D'Rabbanan. This whole Shala Muktzah and this Gzer and everything is a Gzer D'Rabbanan. So he's Neman because of that. The Taz, however, says the reason that he's Neman is because to say that it was picked yesterday, if he's Miyasech Vituma, which means by definition he doesn't realize what he says is going to be a nafkamina legabi the Isser Heter, he doesn't realize that there's any ramifications in halacha for this Jew to take it if he says it was picked yesterday or today. That's the pshat in Miyasech Vituma over here. So the Taz says the reason he should be Neman is because since a goy would want to be mashbiach mekcho, he would want to, either whether it's a gift or he's trying to sell it, he wants it to be as a choice of a product as could be. So the most choice product it could be would be that it's picked today, that it's fresh. So if the goy says it was picked yesterday, he's neman because he's saying something to his own detriment to say that it was picked yesterday. He's taking away the freshness of his gift, or the freshness of his item he wants to sell. So that's the reason we makabel what he says over here. So I'm not sure why the like according to the, well, let's say enough kamina, let's say pairs that are not nechal chai, that are chaser by them hachana, and they need a derisa to be prepare them. You have to do a malacha derisa to prepare them. So then according to the Magen Avram, he says that his svara won't help over here. It's not derbanan anymore. But perhaps the svara of the Taz, mashbiach mekcho, would still apply. If the even over here, I'm not sure why the Taz had to come onto this, because the Chorah says shalad derbanan. Maybe because the shorish of the question of the peiros is the shorish of a derisa, and therefore you need an extra nemanos over here. It's not enough just to say Mesiach V'tumo. The Taz holds you need to add an extra svara of mashbiach mekcho, your mashbiach, your wares, your fruit. So perhaps according to the Taz, it would even help by something which is chaser malacha to prepare it. Maybe the fact that there's an additional mashbiach mekcho, maybe even by derisa will be named over here. The Mishnah Berurah, however, it goes like the Magen Avram. The Mishnah Berurah says that if it needs a derisa to prepare it, then we're not going to be miming the goy to say that he did it on Erev Yom Tov. So Sakalacha, we're going with the svara of the Magen Avram. We're not going with the svara of Meshbiach Mekcho. We're going with the svara of his neman because it's drabanan, and therefore anything that needs a derisa, this object has to have had a melacha derisa done to it. Let's say it's pas palter. And if Luyitzur, you would hold that for some reason the grain was, or the grain was had to be ground up or something like that it wasn't ready before Yom Tov. Whatever you find a malacha deraisa, that the only way this thing could be in the world is through a malacha deraisa, then perhaps according to the Taz is makam lahakil, because to say it's fresh is in his best interest. But according to the Magen Avram, since you needed a deraisa over here, he's only neman for drabanas, not for deraisas. He won't be neman. And the Mishnah Berurah paskins that's for doesn't mention the svara of the Taz. Okay, it's already very late, so I thought we'd talk about Sif Daled, but I guess we'll wait that for next week and add that into the last Sifim. But so this is at least our last year of this year, and I sent everybody, if anybody wants to listen, some material on Malchia Zachonas and Shofros, which should be Zochet to. We don't have that. We're not Zochet to having that the first day this year, but we're Zochet to have Shabbos in place of it. It's this year Mekayim Yom Zichron Shua Yolachem. It's a Zichron Shua, so we have a Zikaron of Malchia Zachonas and Shofros. So if we understand what those are really all about, then we can understand maybe how to Mekayim that also on Shabbos inside the Musagim Shabbai. Whether it's a Gzer Drabanan or it's a pasuk that we darshan a pasuk that like one sheet that holds in the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, beginning of the fourth parak, and take a look over there. Whether it's a machlokes, whether it's a pasuk deraisa that you don't blow the shofar on the first day when it's Shabbos, or it's a Gzer Drabanan Shem Yataltel Dalad Amos Rishus Rabim. Because Shabbos is so chamor, one Jew at the end of all the doors might be Mechal Shabbos, or it's Karadim and Vatal, the whole Tkiyah shofar, just because of one possible time of Chil Shabbos over all the doros. That's Kadai to take away shofar from everyone for all the years. You see how chamor Shabbos is, how chamor in eyes of Chazal. We look at it and say, like, what do they do? Took shofar away? No, but it's like they understood what Shabbos, one time Chil Shabbos really means. So anyway, we should be zocha to Shana Tova Sukkah, Ksiva Chsina Tova, to all of you, to all of us, and should be zocha this year to continue steiging and tzliach and all the avodas hakodesh, and have nachas from all your families and parnasa and good health, and we should be Yirtzeh Hashem by next Rosh Hashanah, we'll continue our Shiurim in Yerushalayim Yer HaKodesh, Mr. Hashem.
Amen. Thank you so much, Rabbi.
A good Gebench Shiur.
Good bench here. Thank you.